Welcome to Momentum's virtual training series, where we invite expert facilitators to share their knowledge on topics that advance women in leadership.
We are going to go ahead and get started right now. We want to thank you all for hopping on here today to our virtual training at Momentum Leaders. Thank you so much for being here. We are so honored to have Dr. Lorien Pratt here with us, leading us. She was one of our breakout speakers at our leadership conference we had in March, and she was speaking on artificial intelligence. For a lot of us, that can sound very daunting, a little bit scary. And she has been gracious to come here today and help us understand that it's not as scary as some people may think it is. And we appreciate her intelligence. Dr. Pratt is a chief scientist and the co-founder of Quantellia. And we appreciate her, her efforts in bringing all the intelligence of the AI into our practical uses in our businesses. She is an entrepreneur. She's an innovator. She's a TEDx speaker. She's a keynote speaker. She's an author. And I'm going to have to brag on her just a little bit right here. She has written the first ever book on decision intelligence. She has created an industry that is projected to be worth 50 billion with a B dollars. It is growing that quickly. There are some master's programs that are being developed out of all of her her research and how she has laid this out. So congratulations on that too. And we are also asking that today, during all of the training that she'll be giving us, if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them into the chat today. And we will make sure that we watch that and try to make sure that we present that to Dr. Pratt so she can answer any questions that you do have. So Dr. Pratt, I do not want to hesitate any longer. I want to turn this over to you. Thank you so much for being here with us at Momentum Leaders.
Thank you, Darla. Very much appreciated. If I could have screen share, I will get started.
That would help.
Oh, technology. We can do it. Really, we can. So thank you, everyone. I so much appreciate you taking the time to be here with me today. I hope to pay back your investment of time with a huge amount of value. And so, as Darla said, yes, please, any questions. I think it's a much more interesting presentation if I'm not just talking the whole time, but if you ask your questions. So my goal for today is to take you from this idea that I think a lot of people are expressing, is that AI is really complex and I'm worried about it, right? So it's not just the complexity, but there is some concern to, I'd like in the end of half an hour to get you to, I'm not worried about it. And if you're interested, I know how to get started if I want to actually do AI. So this is a slide I'm going to show later, but it's kind of the backbone of the talk. So I wanted to show it to you first. And to say, really, there's 6 ways that organizations get started with AI. One is somebody goes, like your shareholders go, oh, AI is really important, got to do it, right? Without necessarily any business reason for that. Another is you have like some specific, what we call a use case. And a use case is a problem that you think AI can solve. And for now, I'm not going to go into the details of the use cases, but there's all these different categories of use cases. Another is you might say, all right, we're going to invest in an AI strategy. We're going to investigate what are the 50 use cases, what are the 50 places where AI might provide value to our company. And let's be really systematic about this. Let's try to pick the early ones that are easy to do, low risk, and that would give us a lot of value. Another approach people take is they've got some data and analytics people in their company, and they say, we're going to build this big data lake, and we're going to have all this data. And if we have all this data, well, it's not valuable. It's like raw ingredients. It's like flour and water, and we need to make cake. And so we need to do AI to get value out of our data. I don't recommend that approach because you usually end up wasting a lot of time on data that you don't actually need for the AI. But that is a very, very widespread approach. Is it starts with the tech data people, who are trying to sort of justify or get some return on investment out of some big data investments. You might have a new product initiative. I'm working with a couple of companies that have never had an AI product before, but they think, hey, this would be a good idea. And then a version of that is you might be a startup company, and AI is like your bread and butter. And so these are kind of, in my experience, doing this for a long time, the 6 ways that people get into AI to start with. And the problem is it gets really complicated as you try to go up that learning curve. And so that's really the point of this talk. Just a little bit of background. Darla, thank you for the fabulous introduction. I think what I want to say is I spend most of my time building AI software solutions and selling them. I do some sales, but I'm kind of a techie nerd, so I'm kind of bad at that. So I'm trying to evangelize and build things. And so this is not, this talk is coming from having built these for a really long time. So I started out like in the 80s doing, I bet you didn't know, AI's been around for 50 years. Most people think it's only been a few months, but I did speech recognition. I did the Human Genome Project, some DNA stuff. It's been a really actually cool career. I built $100 million budget for the US court system using AI. Call centers, Earth observation. I've got a climate project right now. I've got a healthcare project right now, 2 healthcare projects. It's really exciting to be the technologist and then to support these people doing such interesting things. And I've been just really honored to have landed in this field. Within that, if we click at one level, I have done 3 different kinds of AI. Most recently, large language models, which is what you guys probably know the most about, like Gen AI and ChatGPT. But those are pretty new in terms of them being useful enough that they can drive business value. So the majority of my career has been in these other 2 places, supervised machine learning and decision intelligence. And if you're trying to drive value from AI, you need to know about all 3 of these. And so that's my goal in the next 22 minutes is to try to help you get the basics of these 3 areas, again, so that it'll get you into how to think about AI. So I'm going to talk about how to think about AI, then real quick, LLMs, supervised machine learning, decision intelligence, and then we'll come back to that how to get started slide with this as background. So let's just, be real clear. AI's got a 50-year history, and it's much more than the Gen AI that you guys are hearing about right now, but it's bizarre, okay? What new technologies? Did we have like killer toaster movies in Hollywood and killer screwdriver movies when somebody invented the screwdriver? No, we did not, okay? But we have had killer AI movies. So AI is kind of unique in this regard in that there's like a lot of disinformation. And the disinformation comes from Hollywood. It comes from the fact that AI has been kind of an under the hood academic discipline where everybody who does it is like a PhD as opposed to somebody who's using it for a business problem. And so it's like everybody's got this like under the hood mentality as opposed to the driver's seat mentality. And then it's clickbait, right? If those 2 things weren't bad enough, if somebody writes, oh, AI is going to kill us, then that's really exciting. And so the media loves to amplify that message. And so you might hear AI is dangerous 300 times. And you think that the 300, you don't hear things 300 times unless they're true. Well, it turns out that because of how weird AI is, you can hear something hundreds of times and it cannot be true because of this like weirdness. So my goal, and I'm doing this today in really short version, but my mission in life in general is to take all of this complexity and to help you chart a path through it, because there is massive value here. But if you get distracted by the complexity, there's also the opportunity to waste a lot of time, to introduce a lot of risk to your projects, and to make them unnecessarily costly and unnecessarily low value. So there is a path through all of this disinformation where there's massive amounts of value. So again, we've got this different ways of getting started, but the problem as you're trying to get started is if you start Googling, which is what everybody does, you'll get so much disinformation that their risk of getting pulled off track is really, really high. So let's click into that a little bit. What does AI mean? What does artificial intelligence mean? It keeps changing what it means. AI, the only thing that's universal, that's happened for 50 years, is AI is the label we give to things that we thought computers couldn't do, that only humans could do. So right now, we didn't think computers could have a conversation with you, right? So that gets called AI. 20 years ago, we didn't think a computer could look at a pathology report and find cancer in a slide. And, oh, wow, computers can do that. That's pretty magic. We're going to call that AI. And speech recognition, 10 years ago, we didn't think computers could recognize your speech or could speak, but it turns out they can. And so that gets labeled AI. So there's this really weird, I mean, if all the other disinformation wasn't bad enough, the definition keeps changing. And then, everybody sort of has this feeling that there's something about tech that's frightening. And there is. Tech is dangerous in many ways. And then there are other people, because of this stuff, that say AI is the thing to be frightened about. Well, I'm here to tell you, it's not AI is the thing to be frightened about. It's various organizations that are trying to influence you to buy things that you might not necessarily want to buy, or believe things that you not necessarily want to believe. But that's not about AI. That's software and data. And yeah, AI is part of it, but it's not the AI that you should be frightened about. And so people put those two things together and they say, I'm frightened of AI. But please believe me, there's lots of reasons for people to tell you that it's AI that you should be frightened about that actually aren't grounded in the fact that it is the AI. It's just math. It's just a piece of software, okay? And just like other pieces of software and other pieces of math, there's value in it, but also unintended consequences. I mean, when the first cars were invented and people didn't have seatbelts and they hadn't thought that through, people died, right? So every time we have a technology, even a great one that has a lot of value, there are these unintended consequences. What's particularly weird about AI is the history. Every time we have a new AI thing, a thing that computers do that we didn't think computers could do, we call it AI. It makes the front page of the New York Times and we get all excited about it. And then we enter the trough of disillusionment because it doesn't pan out. And this has happened 3 times in the past. So front page of the New York Times, 1965, computer brain will solve things. And it got all hyped. And then it failed. And in the 80s, we had Japan and the UK and the US, all these huge AI initiatives, front page of the New York Times again, right? And it didn't pan out. So we've had these sort of like winter, summer cycles. And I'm telling you this because as you start to wade through all the AI knowledge, if you're trying to do AI, you're going to run into this stuff. And so you really need to know how much it tends to get hyped, and then how much that the reality is not necessarily in line with the hype more than anything else. Okay. So let's try to cut through that hype. I'm going to tell you in the next few minutes about 3 kinds of AI methods. We'll start with large language models because that's what everybody knows. 2 slides on supervised machine learning, and then just a little bit on decision intelligence. These are the 3 places within AI that have all the value, okay? And so again, I'm just trying to curate this big, messy space for you guys. I think large language models are really the future of content. I think 5 years from now, we're going to say, really, you read the book by looking in the index or looking in the table of contents for the section that you wanted, and then you read the book front to back, or no, that's not how we deal with books. Books, we're going to talk to them. We're going to say, what does this book say about subject X or subject Y? And it's going to talk back to us. And before Google, we didn't think the internet was searchable. Well, right now we don't think books are talkable, but they will be. And so that's really exciting. That's a new way that lets people have access to information in a way that's just so much easier than it's been before. I mean, think about Googling. You get all the search results, but then you have to take all those search results and decide what to do with them. So we're going to see this revolution in how we interact with tech. And this has happened before. Before 1992, I was a computer nerd in high school in the 70s. And the computers I used had these like 80 characters across, 24 characters down, and there was nothing visual. And somebody in around the early 90s, they had the web browser and it was visual. Oh, it's so much easier to use. So it's not the computer tech, it's not the under the hood stuff that matters. It's this driving, it's the driver's seat stuff that matters. We made it easier to use, and that's why tech took off. I mean, the internet, I was in a chat room in 1978, I was doing email in 79. I mean, all this stuff existed, but it wasn't easy enough to use. And so what's happening, again, just like it happened with the tech boom of the 90s, driven by the web browsers, we're having a tech boom driven by this new thing, which is you can talk to it, and that's cool. All right, so let's dive into large language models. Again, don't have much time today. And I tried to leave, we'll see if I can pull it off, Darla. I tried to leave time for people to ask me questions. So I'm going to do a pretty quick version of this. So what is a large language model? And again, we're not doing the under the hood stuff. We're doing the driver's seat stuff. It is a piece of software that Googles the internet. I mean, Googles, isn't that funny? It grabs all the data from the internet, and then it creates this thing called an LLM model. And an LLM model is a different kind of software, different piece of software that takes a conversation that you've had so far, like all the text from your conversation so far, and decides what's the next thing to say. That's it. Okay. To understand LLMs at the driver's seat level, you need to understand that there's this thing that takes all the data that creates the model, and then the model takes the conversation and says what to say next. All right. So at this level, that's really all you need to know. The first thing is usually called learning. That's the learning process. Learning means taking all the data and creating a model. Inference means using the model to have something that goes in and something goes out. It's just it goes into, it goes out. It's really, really simple. Now, you've heard problems with ChatGPT, and I think one of the things we know is that their responses are very general purpose. So I can't ask ChatGPT about a book that I wrote because it doesn't have the text of that book. And I can't ask it about my sales proposals because it doesn't have the text of my sales proposals. So what's been happening in the last few months is we're doing this thing where we're building these software systems that have that use the LLM, but then we're feeding all this extra knowledge to the LLM to overcome those hallucinations, the bad information, and the fact that it doesn't have any personalized or custom knowledge. So we have like the book, and we're giving it little paragraphs out of my book so that when it responds to the conversation, it can use the knowledge in my book. We might have personalized knowledge about the person who's talking to it, and we're feeding that secretly to the LLM in the background so that when it decides what to say, it can take its knowledge of your user into account. You might have just data from a database. That's another kind of knowledge module. And then you might have a reasoning engine that says, you know, when I send my kid to an Ivy League college, that'll lead to a high tuition, but then they'll network, you know, some chain of events that goes from some action you can take to some outcome. So this is the new thing that's happening in LLMs, is we're overcoming their limitations by adding these knowledge modules to them. And that's really exciting. I've been doing a lot of work in this space, and it sort of takes, you know, this basic vanilla LLM that has these problems and starts to overcome those problems because we're doing this extra software, this extra knowledge around. So that's my quick 2-slide introduction to LLMs. I guess the one quick example is, you know, you got your salespeople and there's all this CRM data and your historical sales documents, and the LLM, you know, like Googling it, can go into all those docs. But then what's really nice is it can summarize and answer questions before you go into a sales call. So that's just one example of taking all this custom knowledge and then putting it inside the dialogue so that it can answer questions. Now, LLMs support multiple types of use cases, multiple kinds of problems. Number 4 is the one I think most people are familiar with, where the LLM can create some content for you, for like a blog post or an action plan for your Momentum Leadership Conference, or you know, with pictures, it can generate a picture. I think most people think of LLMs or Gen AI, two names that are somewhat similar, as good at creating content. But as I talked about, they can also disseminate content. They can gather content. You can watch how people talk to your thing, And if there's patterns in that, then you know what your market wants. That's cool. They can do decisions like we talked about. And of course, we can do language translation. So I'm just trying to explode. Maybe you've seen LLMs that generate content. I want you to know Gen AI can do more than that. And I think of it as in these 5 different categories. Okay, that's thing number 1. And if you know what I just said, you now have sort of the mental tools to think about how LLMs might fit into your business. But AI is not just Gen AI. There's huge amounts of power that we're going to overlook if we just do Gen AI. So if we go back into the 50 years of history, AI is also something called supervised machine learning. Big words, but it's actually not so hard to understand. What supervised machine learning does is it automatically creates software given examples of the desired input and output. So I'll just give this example. Let's say you want to have software that figures out what's the miles per gallon of my car going to be before I build the car. And you have this historical data. Well, this car was this heavy. It had this number of cylinders. It had this engine displacement. You got all these statistics, and you knew that this other car had that data, and its miles per gallon was 22 miles per gallon. And here's this other car, and it was 58 miles per gallon. So you have this historical information, which shows the inputs and the outputs. The inputs are the data about the car, and the outputs is the miles per gallon. And traditionally, you would write a piece of software, Java, Pascal, COBOL, Fortran, that does calculations. You know, the displacement of the engine contributes 0.25 miles per gallon, whatever it is, right? What machine learning does for you is it says, don't write software. Take this data, just like the LLM, take the data, feed it to a learning thing, and then it produces this thing called a model. And the model takes that data about the car, and before you built the car, it tells you what it thinks the miles per gallon is going to be. So this is an easier way to write software. And for certain domains, we actually get much higher accuracy. Like if I do a bunch of pictures, here's a picture, that's a dog. So the data is the picture, and then the output is that's a dog. Here's a picture, that's a cat. Here's a picture, there's a dog. And you do that 5 million times, feed that to the machine learning thing, and it automatically writes the software that you showed a new picture. It says, 50% chance that's a dog, 90% chance that's a dog, et cetera. So supervised machine learning, fancy word you can now use with your friends and acquaintances to impress them at cocktail parties. Supervised machine learning just means automatically creating software from examples of inputs and outputs. And so I did another like businessy example of this one. So let's say you're at a bank, or you're at a telecom company, or you're a fleet service. You've got all your historical information about customers, and you also knew the customers you lost. Like maybe it's a subscription service, so they cancel their subscription. That's the input and output. So the history is all the things that the customer did, how often they called your call center, how much they spent, et cetera, you know, where they live, their zip code, all this information. And then you got this historical data that says, we lost them 2 months after we gathered that data. So that's input and output. That's a great domain for machine learning. You take that historical data, you use it to automatically create software that says this customer is 52% likely to leave in the next 2 months. You might want to do something about them, right? So I've got like lists of like hundreds of examples of where many companies have historical data that show historical inputs and outputs. We can use machine learning to predict the output from the input. 2 slides, supervised machine learning. Now you have the tools to think about it, okay? And massively powerful, used around the world, used by investment firms in particular to predict stock prices in secret ways that they'll never tell you about because it drives billions of dollars of value. All right, third thing, decision intelligence. DI is the newest AI. We did LLMs first. We did supervised machine learning. DI is only really starting to be popular in the last couple of years. But, you know, as Darla said, it's predicted. So if you want to be ahead of the game, you start talking about DI to people. DI says that people don't think in terms of miles per gallon of cars, or is it a dog or a cat, that there's something more fundamental, which is what business outcome do you want to achieve? And what choices do you have to achieve those business outcomes? What are the actions that you can take? And so this is a little simulation example where our choices, our actions are, what social distance are we going to insist on? Like where we put the little markers, you know, this is during the pandemic, we built this one. And then how many people can you convince to wear masks? And then we say, okay, if we have that, and then we have all this technology where you can simulate how people move around and how the particles move, here's what the outcome will be in terms of how many people get sick. So what DI basically says is, let's start with business outcomes. And DI is a great way to get into AI because it forces you to say, what are we trying to achieve? You know, are we trying to get, you know, net revenues, customer experience, fewer people dying from the pandemic? You know, you start with your outcomes. And it turns out, it was really kind of interesting. DI started out as purely technical, but it turns out if you just have meetings without any technology where you get aligned around your outcomes and get aligned around your actions, that even without this fancy tech with the fake particles floating around, you can drive a lot of value in a lot of domains. So really simply, decision intelligence, DI, is about using computers to build simulations of how your choices of actions you can take. I'm like, you know, should I offer this class online or not? Should I hire traveling nurses at my hospital or should I hire permanent nurses? There's all kinds. What price should I charge for my product? There's all these actions you can take that lead to outcomes. You know, what's the 30-day return time of my patients? What are my, you know, numbers in my hospital for, you know, patient, you know, health, things like that. This, almost everybody can think of their business in terms of choices they make and outcomes. And so it's meant to be like the universal leveler that everybody can sort of understand AI in terms of business actions and outcomes. And that's what DI is. And DI is big. I'll go through these slides really fast. $50 billion market. The big surprise to me, and the reason that I have worked in DI for so long, is even very large organizations, only 14% of people really are careful about their big decisions. And the big surprise to me as a technologist is as you get more senior, that number goes down because senior people have had longer careers and they haven't had data available to them. And you'd think that as the decisions go more senior and they impact the company, that people would get more rigorous with data and more careful with decisions. And it's actually the opposite. So despite all this data and AI, we have big decisions made by governments. This won't surprise you, right? Made by governments, made by organizations, made by nonprofits, are often kind of dumb. And so there's a lot of opportunity to sort of use DI, whose job it is to bridge the gap between people making decisions and the technology. And so what it's meant to do is be the bridge to help you use more data, more AI, more tech to solve, you know, the big decisions that you're facing so that you can achieve the outcomes that you want. So real general purpose. And then the way we think about DI is we draw these diagrams, and you can do this now, okay? You do not need any tech. You can just get a whiteboard, get together with your team. So if you want to start doing AI today, start with DI because it's a really great place to start. Talk to your team about what outcomes you're trying to achieve. Make sure you're aligned around those. Maybe draw them on a whiteboard. I use a virtual whiteboard where everybody can participate all at the same time. Once you have those outcomes, what actions, what choices are we facing right now? And then start to draw the wires. Well, if we invest more in marketing, it'll cost us money and that'll hurt our bottom line. But if we invest more in marketing, we'll have more customers and those customers will recommend our service to other people. So we'll have even more customers, which leads to revenues, which we can reinvest in marketing. And now we get a feedback loop. And isn't that great? I mean, so just drawing these diagrams is super helpful, even if you never use AI or any sort of tech. All right, so that in a whirlwind presentation, that is my introduction to the three most powerful AI methods. Large language models that let you talk to the content, supervised learning that let you automatically create software just from examples of the input and output, and decision intelligence, which uses all the AI tools together that helps you to think about how AI and data, and by the way, econometrics and computational fluid dynamics, all kinds of tech can help you decide which actions to take to lead to your outcomes. And so that's kind of the future of AI, is situating it, you know, within actions and outcomes. All right. So just to wrap up, how do we get started with AI? Let's come back to this. So again, 6 primary ways. And I like starting with a single use case. I like if you have an intuition that you could use AI somewhere, think about what I presented. Do we have something that would work for supervised machine learning, like some historical data? Do we have some business outcome we're kind of trying to achieve that we think we could do better if we use some data and some tech? And so that's how we get started with AI. I'm not going to read this eye chart. I'm going to say if you want to get started with DI, I sort of said some of this, like talk about the outcomes, then talk about the actions, then draw the chain of events from one to the other. It's actually really simple. And I wrote a book about it called The Decision Intelligence Handbook. So if you go to dihandbook.com, that's a nice book that teaches you how to do that. And what's great about it is you can get value right away. We had a bank we worked with that all we did was draw the diagram, and they said the diagram alone was worth $10 million a year because it helped them. It's like if you've ever done Gantt charts or tasks or it's like before we knew how to draw pictures of project task dependencies, and now we have a way of drawing a picture of something. So just drawing the picture is really valuable, it turns out, even if you don't have a resource leveling automated tool, in project planning, even if you don't have the tech, it's still useful. And then these are kind of the 5 steps for a supervised machine learning project. Again, I'm not going to read them in detail, and I am going to leave it at that. Thank you guys for your time. And I wanted to do it quick because I thought your questions would be the most valuable part of today. So I did you the really rapid fire version. Thank you for putting up with me talking very fast. And I'll take questions for half an hour now.
Thank you so much. I have one because how is this working with data analytics for anyone, whether you're in marketing, your public relations, sales? How is this going to be blended with that? Is it going to take over data analytics? Is it going to blend in with it or even add to data analytics being more accurate?
I love that question, Darla. It is going to be complementary. So it's not going to make your analytics be more accurate, but it's going to help you. Let me actually, I guess I'll leave that slide up. It's going to help you decide what to do with it. Right? So you've got your analytics that says this sales campaign is this effective, this conversion rate is this, blah, 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 blah. You got all your analytics. So now what do you do? Right? Based on that, DI says if you have all that data and all those analytics, it helps you decide what action to take that helps you lead to your goals. So it's very complementary, and that's a great question. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, so Whitney was asking for LLMs when you use text from your book and add context to a question. Does that get stored or incorporated into the model and used when others ask it questions related to your book?
That's a really good question. Yes and no. LLMs out of the box do not do that in any way that's predictable or plannable. But if you do that thing where you write the software that has the LLM in the middle of it, then you can definitely set things up. And I've done this a couple of times where, so the thing says a thing to you and you say, well, I disagree, or here's some extra knowledge. You can set it up such that it says, oh, thank you for that extra knowledge. And then it stores that in that knowledge base so that you can use it the next time around. To me, I'm really glad you asked that, because that's one of the most exciting things that I think is in store for the next few months. Not a lot of people are doing like that round trip where the conversation can enhance the knowledge base. But I think in the next few months, we're going to see a lot of that happening. And I had one customer that asked me to do it. So I've got one project that's doing that right now. And that's pretty exciting because now it's not just static knowledge, but it's continuously improving. Fabulous question. Thank you.
Paula wanted to know if I wanted to get my 14-year-old interested in AI, do you have a suggestion on where to start, which would probably be about the level I need to be on. So thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, I wish there were great resources. But I guess my favorite way of doing AI, if you're just starting out, is there's a tool called H2O. And what you do is you have to learn R a little bit. So R is a programming language, but you can get an R tutorial and you can learn it like it's the basics in like a day or two. So you download R, you learn R, then you get H2O, and then they have a little PDF booklet that kind of takes you through how to build an AI model. So that's the supervised learning part of AI, which is harder. If you want to do the LLM part of AI, I would go to ChatGPT, and they have a free account that you can get to, and I would start talking to it. And then the next thing after you've talked to it, you kind of learned what it can do, is learn about something called prompt engineering, which is the first thing you say is, okay, the rest of my conversation, I want it to be a decision-making conversation about whether I should go to college or not, and if so, which college. And I want to take you to take me through a series of questions. So you're sort of telling it how to behave. And then based on this, it's called a prompt. It's really funny because sometimes you have to repeat yourself. I really, really, really want you to do X or Y. And only if you say it like 3 times will it pay attention. So prompt engineering is an art. So it's like this text thing where you type in to the ChatGPT how you want it to behave for the rest of the conversation. And then it does that in the rest of the conversation. So that's another really easy way to get going. And you just do that by getting a free ChatGPT account. So those are 2 kind of on-ramps.
So let me walk through that one more time. So I get the Chat GPT, but then I
Right.
teach, I put in there prompt engineering,
Yep.
and
You put in a big
you know,
paragraph. You put in like 4 paragraphs at the beginning and say,
okay.
for the rest of this conversation, I want you to talk to me in the voice of Elmer Fudd. I never want you to tell me more than 1 paragraph of information at a time, because
Okay.
it tends to info dump, right? So I like it when I ask it to do just one thing at a time, and then I'll ask you. So you tell it how you want it to behave up front.
Boundaries.
Yeah, set boundaries, right? Or you can say, please always respond in sonnet form. That's kind of fun. Or please have the voice and respectful level of, Mahatma Gandhi, right? So what's really neat is you can tell it how to behave so that the rest of the conversation fits what you said. So learning prompt engineering is another really neat way of getting started with AI, specifically LLMs.
That's interesting. Do you have another crash course or learning opportunities that you would recommend to someone without a formal education in data science or tech? And do AI or tech leaders at a company need to have a specific set of skills in order to effectively serve? That's a good question too.
I love that question. So let me answer that in 2 parts, Darla.
Okay.
There is an answer to that question that most people believe to be true that is wrong, which is, oh, we got to get started in AI. Let's hire the top AI PhDs from the universities to come work with us and head up our AI project. And this is, gosh, I've had so many of my clients make this mistake. And the problem is that the AI PhDs are taught how to build the engine under the hood. And so they'll come in and they'll talk about how the carburetor works, right? And how many cylinders you don't need to know that, right? The AI PhDs don't know how to drive the car. They don't know how to pick a good AI problem, prepare the data your historical data for the AI, build the AI system, and most importantly, how to drive business value out of it. Their data scientists just aren't trained to do that. And if you're in a data science program that teaches you how to start with the problem and work backwards to the data, as opposed to starting with the data and then only dealing with the problem as an afterthought, please tell me, because I haven't found one yet. Every data scientist I ever talked to is not taught that, how to do that. And so the best practice, now I'm going to answer your question, Darla, is user good senior software engineers, because good software people know how to talk about the problem. They do something called design thinking and requirements analysis, or sometimes it's a business analyst whose job it is to listen to people who have a problem and to translate that into the language of the tech. And that might be a business analyst or a software engineer. Because the hard part these days is not knowing the tech, because you don't need to know what's under the hood to use these days. The hard part is that translation between the business problem and the technology.
I like that. I like that. So, and that was from Haley. Thanks, Haley, for asking
Thank
that.
you,
So
Haley.
Caitlin
That's really good.
Caitlin Foote was wanting to know, what advice would you have for small businesses starting to explore AI tools and developing an accepted use case policy? That's good too.
Oh, an accepted use case policy. Well, so this gets into the arena of AI safety and AI regulation. The first thing to ask is the AI, does it have to do with anything to do with humans or not? Right? So like personally identifiable information, people's faces, stuff like that. I've done like 3/4 of my AI projects haven't had to do with humans. It's like analyzing a battery or creating a budget or something. And if it's not getting into like personal, private human stuff, your risk of the AI violating privacy or something is much lower. So that would be the first thing I would do for acceptable use. And obviously, I'm not going to teach you everything about acceptable use in the next 30 seconds of the answer to this question. So I'm giving you the two big things to do. One, human stuff versus non-human stuff. That's a big differentiator. And the other is dangerous stuff versus not dangerous stuff. So if your AI is recommending a health treatment, dangerous. Self-driving cars, dangerous, right? And so you want to pay way more attention to those than like a cool app to play a video game, less dangerous, right? So to me, those are the two dimensions I would start with. I would say any acceptable use policy to start with shouldn't even worry about the safe side of those two dimensions. Should worry about dangerous things and things that involve human data. Start there.
Awesome. Fonda had asked, are there any risks to consider in relying on Chat GPT for personal or business use? Or for
Yes,
Zoom,
if you
because
take
we
it
could use it here. We can use it
yeah,
here
we
on our
could.
Zoom recordings.
Yes, if you take it too seriously and you don't double check what it says, because a lot of the information can be false. So just like, it's like anything, there's dangers in driving a car if you misuse it, right? It's why we have licenses before we can drive a car. And it's dangerous. What people tend to do, they tend to think, because up until a minute ago, the only things that could talk were things that were intelligent and trustworthy, other humans that you communicate with. There's obviously exceptions in the media and things like that. But it used to be that by definition, something that could talk in coherent sentences was trustworthy, or at least you could double check its truthfulness. And suddenly we have this thing that can talk coherently that might not be trustworthy. And yet people haven't sort of upgraded their brains and how they think about it. They think if it's talking in a coherent way, therefore it's trustworthy. And so the key thing here is not to always believe it and to double check anything you hear. That being said, oh my gosh, ChatGPT is so good at getting you like the 80% solution and saving you a whole bunch of research time so you can really focus on the trustworthiness of what it says. I use ChatGPT for writing software, and I'm probably 10 times more faster writing software than it ever was. Does it ever give me correct software? Never, right? Does it save me a huge amount of time? Absolutely. And I think that's for the foreseeable future how we're going to be thinking about them, is it's a time saver, but we have to then inject our human brain into the loop to make sure that it's not lying to us.
I like that, how you're making it that we're complementing our human intelligence with all of the computer intelligence that you're sharing with us today.
Yeah, and let me comment on that, Darla, for a second. A lot of the history of AI has been about fully automated things that don't have any human in the loop. And so the 50 years, gosh, I want to say 99% of the work in AI that's been done to date is about a fully automated thing where it's not complementary. So this idea that there's this human computer partnership is really not super well studied within AI. It's studied in computer human interaction in this community called CHI, computer human interaction. But AI people have not done a lot of work on how humans interact with AI. It just hasn't received a lot of attention. And so I think what's really exciting that's happening right now is what you just said, right? Is that it's this complementary relationship. And so, to get, I guess it's a sort of a bottom line lesson from what I'm saying, to get the maximum value out of AI, is, horses for courses, use it for what it's good at, but don't take it too seriously, and keep your brain in the loop whenever you're using an AI system.
Awesome. So here's another question from Haley. Does supervised ML or DI need to start with your own company's historical data to inform decisions, or is there a universal database that it can access as well? And is it
Haley,
data
you're
or
so
data?
smart.
Is it data or data?
I
Does
say
it matter?
data, but I don't think data's wrong.
Okay. I just want to
Haley,
make sure.
that's such a brilliant question. I really, really love that. And the reason I like it is it's like you'd think there would be, but there's not. And this person invented something called transfer learning 30 years ago, who happens to be named Lorien Pratt. It was the first thing I invented. And the idea of transfer learning is you have like this general purpose thing, like that is a starting point, and that you then adapt it to your particular situation. And what's crazy about machine learning is almost every company starts with a blank slate. They start with their own data, and they don't use other people's churn systems or other people's customer care systems. And it's only like 30 or 40 years later that my transfer work is starting to get used. It's part of LLMs, right? Because we have these general purpose large language models, and then we specialize them for our particular things. But no, I wish that was true. Generally speaking, you got to start with your own data. But I will do one exception. The cool thing about decision intelligence is that if you have no data at all, you can still get started with decision intelligence, because it helps you structure your problem in a formal way that you can then say, here's where the most important data is. And so when you go to gather your data, DI can tell you where the most valuable data is, so that if you've got limited data resources, you can be very, very focused on where the greatest value is. But great question, because like I should be able to say yes to that, and we will 5 years from now, but no, not now. They're called foundation world models. So if you want to keep an eye open, it has to do with foundation models. That's what's starting to emerge right now, is these foundation models, which have all the knowledge in them that you then specialize for your particular company. They don't really exist yet.
Her second part of
Sorry.
that question is very good, and it goes along with what you were saying. Are
Yeah.
there ways to ensure that your proprietary information is secure when you're using your own data? For example, if she were to use AI to inform how to formulate bids for construction projects, would competitors also be able to access the insights generated?
If you use the raw chat GPT interface, the one we talked about before, Darla, that's free, there is a risk of that. Microsoft, OpenAI don't make any guarantees that what you say to the AI is kept private. However, if you get an Azure account, there's a different way of using ChatGPT where Microsoft makes stronger representations as to the security of your data. So that requires that you build this piece of software, this extra piece of software. So here's the extra software, and then here's the Azure thing. So you have to put this software in the middle, and then you have to invoke the Azure API is the technical term for that. And, I trust Microsoft because they handle HIPAA data. They handle a lot of intelligence data, private. So I think, I haven't done deep research on it, but if you were looking for that level of privacy, I would look to Microsoft's Azure LLM APIs, because Microsoft won't survive, given who their customers are, if they end up being a vector for exposing private data. So that's where I would look to track that down.
So they're going to have to do some adjusting too, aren't they?
They are in the process of adjusting, but it's nothing new. HIPAA data, protected healthcare data, personally identified, they've been in that space for years and years, because their customers are big enterprises and big governments, and they would not be able to have big enterprises and governments as their customers if they weren't very good at that data privacy thing. And no, Microsoft does not pay me to say these things. Maybe they should.
Haley said thank you. That was very helpful. And thank you, Haley, for asking the questions.
Great
I
question,
noticed
Haley.
something at the very beginning. You had sweet potato farmers. So you were creating some of this information to help them. How is this helping farmers? not just sweet potato farmers, but everyone?
I think I'll start with the sweet potatoes because it's really concrete. AI and DI are helping farmers. I'll list two ways. Number one, you can use an AI system. Remember that supervised machine learning thing where I said picture of a cat, then it's a label of a cat, and that's like the historical input-output data? Well, what if it's a picture of a sweet potato and the label is, this is a class 1 grade A sweet potato that should be on the shelf, and here's another picture of a sweet potato and it's really ugly, and so that should go into the dog food, right? So you can do that supervised machine learning to do like an AI camera that looks at things and tells you like product quality. And those work really well. I mean, that's a really mature, that machine vision discipline is really mature, and it all uses supervised machine learning like we talked about. So that's number one. And then number two is we're doing decision intelligence. I have a USDA grant right now through North Carolina where the DI helps people decide, okay, you have all the sweet potatoes that came off the field, and then you've got the order from Kroger's or the grocery store. How do you decide how to pack up? You've got these bins, these big bins of sweet potatoes, some of which are like really pretty and some are really ugly. And you've got the order from the dog food factory and the order from the grocery store. How do you decide how to pack up the sweet potatoes to take them out of the bins and fulfill those orders and put them in boxes that get shipped out? So that's the one I'm working on right now. And we have this like beautiful simulator where you have your different actions. You see the sweet potatoes flowing around, and then you see them going into the right bins, and then that drives your revenues. Because if you send the ugly sweet potatoes to the grocery store, they will send them back, and that will be a problem. And so it turns out it generates a lot of value. And you can sort of imagine how that would be used in other agricultural kinds of problems, that combination of the AI cameras for things and then decisions about what to do once you know which are the pretty things and which are the not pretty things, how to fulfill orders. That's just one use case. But there's thousands of ag use cases out there. Happy to talk to anybody about that.
That's fascinating. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any more questions?
On this slide, I wanted to emphasize I'm doing free office hours for anybody at Momentum, and those do fill up. So if you click on that link or you go to that code, you can book me, and I'm happy. I really love to talk to Momentum people. So you get me for half an hour for free on the phone or in Zoom. So I'm happy if I can help with anything. I'm just happy to pay it forward.
Thank you. That is so gracious of you. Peter Aiken. How to approach when DI isn't the typical approach, but instead many leaders have more approach of discovery versus objective as the first approach. Did I say that correctly?
Interesting. I think I understand the question. Sometimes a leader is in a mode where they're just trying to learn things, but it's not within a particular context of some decision they're trying to make. They just want to understand what's going on in their organization, but they haven't really thought through the decision that information might support. And that's not really what DI is for. I would use tools, for data exploration like ClickView or Tableau to explore things. DI is really about saying, hey, we don't want to waste a lot of time gathering data, looking at data that doesn't fit into some business outcome. So let's get really clear about the business outcome. And then only once we're clear about the business outcome, then looking for the data that helps to inform that so that we can do a good job. So that's really the realm of like exploratory data analysis, which is not a DI thing, really. Great question, though. I mean, that really helps to draw the distinction between when we do use DI and when we don't use DI.
Great. Peter, I hope that does answer your question right there. If not, we can rephrase it.
Darla, you're great. Thank you for interpreting all the questions. It must be hard work seeing what everybody's doing.
So here's another question. Can you use AI to help you come up with business outcomes, for example, specific to your industry?
Yes. If you remember, we talked about LLMs and doing prompt engineering. You can either do that with prompt engineering, but let's just leave the prompt engineering aside. Go into ChatGPT, say, I am in the agricultural sweet potato industry. I'm trying to figure out what business outcomes people typically try to achieve. Give me some ideas for outcomes. And this is where LLMs really shine. In fact, I have a blog post about this at lorienpratt.com. And what's cool is you'll often get from the LLM outcomes you hadn't thought of, like, oh, that could have an environmental benefit. You didn't even think about that, or a social benefit for jobs locally. And the really cool thing it can tell you is unintended consequences. So if you're thinking of taking some actions and it might lead to a negative outcome, and sometimes those negative outcomes come after like this chain of events that's really hard to think through in advance. So I would ask the LLM, what are the typical outcomes that people measure in my industry? But don't stop at that. Say, can you think of any more? Are there any more that most people don't think of? And what about unintended outcomes? What about unintended consequences? And the experiment I did, and again, it's at my blog, lorienpratt.com. You can find an article on this. I had a project. I tested this. I had a project for 2 years at a central bank, a big government agency that was the central bank setting, monetary policy for their country. And after that project, I asked an LLM for some outcomes. It came up with outcomes that none of the central bank executives had thought of. And then I asked it about actions, and it had all these action ideas, things we could do to influence our outcomes that nobody had thought of. So read that article. It was really amazing that it's sort of like this brainstorming assistant. It helps you come up with ideas that maybe you've been sort of tunnel visioned about before. So yes, is the simple answer to that question. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for offering free office hours to our Momentum listeners. I hope everyone has an opportunity to take a snapshot of that with your phone and to take advantage of this opportunity right now. Thank you so much for your time today. And I am going to go ahead and hop on here and do a screen share.
Oh, I have to stop my share.
Okay.
And while I'm attempting to find my mouse, I want to say thank you guys for your time. I really appreciate you hanging out for so long.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you everyone for hopping on today. And I know we have all completely enjoyed everything that you have been sharing with us.
Thank you, Fonda. I just saw her comment.
Learned so much today.
Good.
So I wanted to see how mine's going here. Here we go. I do want to take a moment here to say thank you to our sponsors that have allowed this to be a free opportunity today for everyone. You can see on here all the wonderful people who are our sponsors. If there is any way that you are interested in being a sponsor with us here at Momentum, please reach out to us. We'd love to add your name to that list. It's an amazing group of people who support us and make sure this continues to stay a free arm of what we do of reaching people throughout the whole community. And real quick, I want to go through a few announcements that are very important. If you are thinking of joining, applying to be a part of our program, the executive applications close the 30th of this month. So please check that out. Reach out to us and let's get that going. Of course, I got to do an amazing, I love being the mentor person here, the mentor manager. I love what we do, and I love how that's also a free opportunity we have for women. It is life-changing. It's an incredible opportunity and great program. Reach out to us if you're interested in that. Those of you who are already in our program or thinking of being involved in it, we're having a mentoring mixer on June 26th. So save that date. We'll get more details to you about that. We also have a workshop coming up on April 24th from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. in Huntsville, Alabama with McDonald Graham. So check that out also on our website. And save the date. Our next month training will be on May 8th with Raven Holloway. But we want to thank you again. So sorry, I'm dealing with allergies today. We do want to thank you again, Dr. Pratt, for taking time and being here with us and sharing so much intelligence. I have taken a ton of notes, and I'm going to go back and look at the prompt engineering and how to use this more coming into the things that we're doing here, and even with the mentoring and matching people up and helping them on their journey. So thank you again for what you're doing.
Mentor matching is a great supervised learning problem.
Yes, it is. And I will definitely, I may even take you up on one of your office hours and just see how I can continue to use that. Thank you so much. We want to thank you all for being here today, and can't wait to see y'all again later. And don't forget to take a look at all that Dr. Lorien Pratt is doing on her website. And once again, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Momentum's virtual trainings are made possible with the support of Protective Life, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama, and America's Thrift. Find the full list of sponsors as well as additional resources for women leaders on our website at momentumleaders.org. Thanks for taking the time to invest in you, and remember to like, subscribe, and share our channel. We love reading thoughts and comments, so you can leave those for us here too. You can also connect with us on Instagram